I'm Gasbaggin with Mr. Glenn Twiddle. How are you, buddy?
Mate, Nick Phillips, I'm good, man. Busy and crazy and mid-COVID and hopefully towards the tail end of
Happily
COVID.
post.
But
Yeah.
mate, it's going crazy, mate. And but living life, loving life, and having fun.
But mate, I've got to give, people want me to introduce guests, but I've just got to put something into perspective here, and that is, most people who know me know that. Okay, my artist name is Nick Phillips, but my birth name's Mark. I kind of got on the scene when Princess Anne and Captain Mark Phillips were in the media, and it was Jamie Dunn actually, with his hand up a puppet who said, mate, they want to rechristen you as Nick. So I got renamed as Nick. And these days as an artist, I think of Nick. My family call me Nick at whatever, but I'm always Mark. But mate, you went the other way, because to all of us, lowly people at street level in the music world, you were always Homer, who was like, mate, this amazingly fun entertainer who had a band called Hardways and was just like the nicest guy anyone's ever met. And we all went to sleep one day and we woke up and suddenly you were Glenn Twiddle, who was like the millionaire maker and hanging out with some of the most famous people in the world. I mean, what the, mate? You must have a hell of a story to tell, bud.
Oh man, it's been a wild ride, I tell you. But the whole Homer thing was just a stupid coincidence from when I worked at the casino. So it just became a nickname that stuck. And when I was starting to play guitar, I just thought, for anyone who's sort of a long-time fan of yours, some people will know me because I was sitting at Nick Phillips gigs with a bourbon in hand, watching you, being inspired by you do the thing for years, and then I sort of learned a few chords along the way and started doing it myself. And Homer was just a little bit more memorable than Glenn, the guitarist. so that was that.
So you just made it up. It didn't come from your youth or anything.
No, it was a nickname at the casino. And it is a weird story that there's a game at the casino called craps, which is quite mathematically difficult. Some of the odds on that are 7-5 and 7-6 on. So people be throwing $42 at you and asking you to work out odds of 7-6 and 7-6 on. And, it was quite mathematically complex. And while I was learning that game, because I was a dealer, a croupier at the casino, on one of these things they called a fun night, there were people, because the fun night wasn't real money. So all the participants and all the punters, the punters in inverted commas, the guests that were there for us as dealers to practice on, were just throwing chips at me everywhere. And, and there's 3 people on a craps table. And I was just sitting there holding onto the table with no idea. I was just lost. And the guy who was coaching us said, look at him. He's having a meltdown like Homer in the power plant, like at the nuclear, factory. Yeah. And Homer stuck for 10 years at that casino based on that one meltdown on a fun night pre-opening. So
how much of your people skills, which are immense, how much did you learn in the casino?
No, I probably got the job at the casino because I had them.
Had them, right.
I reckon the people skills came, and this is all getting, but then I suppose that's what Gasbaggin's all about, isn't
Absolutely,
it? I reckon the people skills come from having a surname like Twiddle. And I know that's going back to primary school, but can you imagine how brutal primary school kids were with the surname Twiddle? Oh, okay. So it was either get extroverted and people skills or die. Wow. So yeah, I reckon that goes back to grade 3.
Wow. So mate, when you came into music, was that something you saw then as being your career at that point in time, as moving into?
No, I was a fan. And I'd go see you and I'd go see Owen Gray, Tuffy, less often than you and Owen. Owen was probably my beverage of choice.
Yep.
And if ever, Owen wasn't playing local or anything, we'd go find Nick Phillips somewhere. And, but then you'd sort of spend some time in and out of Australia and in America doing the poetry and beer and the 4 poet steps and things of that nature. And then you'd come back and we'd go see you again. And, but Owen was an amazing influence for me. So me being a musician was literally because I was a fan of you guys. And then my mate, Eddie, hands me a guitar and says, come on, you got to learn this. We're going to start a band. And this is in our early to mid 20s. Yeah. So it's not like I was a child musician. I didn't have a musical bone in my body. Many would argue I still don't and never did. But but yeah, so no, it was just as a fan. And I remember the first chord Eddie taught me was the D chord. And he said, now, if you just put your little finger down here on this fret and go ching ching, that's the intro to Crazy Little Thing Called Love. And I did it. I went, you're right, that is.
Easy.
That sounds fantastic. And so from then on, then I learned the little fake G chord that you could do with one finger on the bottom string of the third fret, and I could play the first two chords of Crazy Little Thing Called Love. So, within a month, I could play Crazy Little Thing Called Love. And then within 2 months, I'd play another thing. And I just kept learning one song after another. And, I remember there was Mark, you'd probably know him, Mark Choman. You remember that band he was with called Small Talk?
Yeah.
So I'd go see them every now and then, right? And I knew one song, Crazy Little Thing Called Love. So they'd let me play the one song that I knew. And then I went and learnt the lead note for note, mirroring the saxophone solo of Going Home, Mark Knopfler. Oh, wow. And I played it on guitar. So I knew that. And they'd let me get up and play the one song that I could play. And I can't even think of the husband's name, but Mark was the sax player. There was Sharon, there was the singer, and Mark, the guitar player. The guitar player, and I can't remember his name, but he would let me. Oh, no, was it Nathan? No, so Mark was the guitar player, and Nathan was the sax player.
Was Nathan Parker?
Was the sax. Yeah, so it wasn't Mark Choman. Of course, Mark's your guitar player.
Yeah.
So Mark was the guitar player with Small Talk, and Nathan was the bloody sax player. So they'd let me play the guitar bit for Going Home. Yeah. And, and that was wonderful of them, because they must have known that I was a hack who could barely churn out one song, but I'd practice that one song until I could perform it. So I really think, Nick, that I'm not a musician. And I'm not a songwriter, I don't think. But I think I did learn enough about music and enough about songwriting and things of that nature, just so I could be maybe my true calling, which is performing that stuff, not necessarily being a purist for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, mate, and you talk about some of the musos back in those days too. Brisbane was just such a great breeding ground. And Owen was like the genuinely original piano man, wasn't he? He was like the guy
he was fantastic.
Billy Joel wrote about, in a sense.
Yeah, 100%. And we used to go see him at the Criterion Tavern Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday Arvo some weeks. We were an embarrassment, but we would go, and Owen must have got so sick of us, but he tolerated us, and we were loud, and I got this loud voice, and oh my God, it was just, we'd sit around that bar, drink it. I mean, we were there when they released Dark and Stormy as a beverage, We didn't even know what it was, but we got smashed on these dollar dark. Oh man.
I had the same vibe with Her Majesty's, like where people would
basically
come down to watch.
I used to go down to those ones too. Yeah.
And basically they'd come in, they'd buy their trays of rum and cokes or whatever, get themselves at the tables to start with. And people would come down to watch the crowd, and they all had actions to my songs. And people would come down to watch the crowd watching me. It was just this amazing interaction thing. And Brisbane was just a great breeding ground of live music back then. And it was great to be a part of it. But, that was a healthy scene that led to, some really serious major acts coming out. And it's just a shame that we've lost that breeding ground a lot now because of not just COVID, but because of music streaming and the way venues have changed and everything else. It's a different world out there at the grassroots level.
But then I wonder if, did what went first? Did the musos go, and hence we lost it as an audience, or did the audience stop appreciating it? Hence the venues couldn't, in all good conscience, pay the talent enough to put a three-piece like Small Talk.
I don't think the music or the audience changed. I think what changed was the approach by the venues. I mean, it very much became, it used to be a market whereby you had to have bands on who could entertain people, to bring people in to buy drinks. That was the way the core of the industry worked. Then when it did get taken over by the bigger companies and the pokies came in, it became much more about how do you facilitate the pokey rooms, how do you make sure people are buying food, and the musicians became very much a secondary part of the industry. And that killed that grassroots to a large degree. I mean, it used to be every town across the state with the touring band circuit had a venue that could hold 1,500, 1,800 people, and you'd get the bands through because they could fill those rooms. When those venues stopped trying to fill those rooms, there just wasn't the places for the acts to play. And then it became a festival orientated thing where acts would have to go to festivals or very much indie rooms. I think there is a swing around gap that will happen, but how that survives COVID and everything else was, we're yet to see.
The one thing that's definitely going to be a consistent is, and it's almost magical, it almost doesn't make logical sense, that music is simply some vocal oscillations of a voice and some vibrating pieces of metal and things of that nature. And yet it has an emotional transient effect when done in a certain way. And that's not logic. There's something about music that it's like all the parts of what make up music shouldn't add up to what it does add up to.
Yeah.
So while we're human beings with that innate response to those vibrating pieces of metal and vocal cords and things like that, then it'll always be there. It's just a case of us finding the way to remunerate the talented who can come up with those things and keep that as part of our lives, because it goes back, probably before, possibly music might even go back. And I don't know the history of music even, but I'm sure it goes back as long as we've been saying ooga booga to each other. We've been saying ooga booga with a certain rhythm and with a certain cadence, and we've had some form of music that we've evolved with it, I'm sure. So it can't go away. It's just a case of what form it's going to take, for the next 50 years, for our kids and our kids' kids.
I was actually having this chat with my daughter this afternoon. We're talking about it, and maybe I have my faith, I have my sense of spirituality, and I think that most religions kind of don't really understand what we're trying to connect to, but we're all trying to. But I do think that whatever's behind the universe, it is a vibrational energy where, quantum physics and everything else is telling us more and more about that. And music is a vibrational energy. And I think in some way that I don't understand, I'm just, obviously a naive person speculating, but I do think that vibrational energy of music does connect us to something that's beyond our consciousness, that connects us to something beyond. And because there's no reason for it. It's not part of the fight or flee evolution process. Music's big, in every culture, it's played such an important part, whether we're celebrating something or we're just dancing for joy or we're, memorializing something. It's in every culture. So that, and a newborn baby responds to music. There's no training that goes into it. So there has to be something more. And it's, that's, to me, that's just a part of the mystery of it. And I think it's magical. And I'm so fortunate that, while I'd like to probably be, making millionaires like yourself, I'm still happy that I've got to play some music along the way.
Oh, dude, I spend it as quick as I can make it, mate. Hey, I've done some good things, but I spend it as bloody quick as, there's no use dying with it.
Mate, but we look, I know amongst my friends, we look at what you've done and we're so proud, mate. We're like kind of out of the street became this dude who's like been fearless. And I know that, in the books you've written and things you've spoken about, it's, you've put yourself out there on a limb and taken some very brave steps along the way. But mate, you've created something pretty unique. Can you just tell people a little bit of your journey? And then, mate, I'd love to talk about your wrestling. I'd love to talk about the people you've brought out, all that stuff. But mate, who are you now?
Yeah, well, I guess the journey, it started, maybe it's just innately. I remember when I was a hack musician, and let's, this isn't being falsely modest. I learned how to play a pentatonic scale, 5 notes.
Hey, that's everything done,
16
mate. That's
different, it's everyone, is it? I learned how to play those 5 notes in a couple of positions on the fretboard, so that I could play just good enough to fool 80% of the audience that I could play guitar, right? And I learned how to sing just good enough that some bugger would pay me $300 or $500 to play for 3 or 4 hours. But when I was, doing that, I'd just be stupid or naive enough or enthusiastic enough. And, like I asked Phil Emanuel at a gig. I went and saw Phil Emanuel play, loved his talent. And he for some reason, he had a GP8, a Roland GP8, and so did I. And that was our point of connection, of bonding. And so me and Phil Emanuel talked about GP8. He signed his poster hey, Glenn, you know, GP8's Rule, love you. And we stayed, you know, I went to a couple of gigs. We got friendly. And then I said, Phil, what are you doing tomorrow? He said, for a bottle of Jack, I'm doing whatever you tell me I'm doing. Yeah. So I went and picked up Phil Emanuel with a bottle of Jack, and we went down to Matt Farthing's studio under his house, and we recorded a couple of songs. And so Phil Emanuel played on one of our albums, you know, and it was almost like I was just silly enough or naive enough to ask, you know. And on our debut album, I had, and this was in the days before you could reasonably ask for this. Like in today's day and age, you can get shout outs, I suppose, from people. But in 1992 or something, maybe a few years after, but in the mid-90s, we had George Carlin, one of the most famous comedians. In most comedians, they have George Carlin as either one or two of the all-time greats in the world of comedy. It's sort of Richard Pryor, George Carlin are the two. And he did our intro for our band because I went to Vegas to see him perform. I complimented him and said, I've come all the way from Australia to see your show. He was absolutely floored that I'd gone to that effort because I was a fan. And he invited us backstage. We hung out for the evening after his show. We had a few drinks. We hung out. He asked me about Rodney Rude, and he said, who's that guy, Rodney Rude? I can't do his accent. Yeah. Who's that guy, Rodney Rude? He does that song, Hey, Santa Claus, you know, the C word. And he said the word. Yeah. And I said, oh, that's not Rodney Rude. That's Kevin Bloody Wilson. And he said, oh, well, who's Rodney Rude? And so we talked about Rodney Rude and Kevin Bloody Wilson. And he asked me to send him over some. So I contacted naively again Rodney Rude's people, didn't know how, found a website, found a phone number, talked to a manager, and Rodney Rude sent me a box set of everything that Rude had ever done. And he said that Rodney was just honored that George Carlin was asking him for Rude stuff. Yeah, he couldn't believe it. So the manager told me. And Kevin Bloody Wilson, I didn't get it. I bought Kevin's stuff because I couldn't get in contact with his people. But I sent over a box of this stuff that George Carlin asked me to send over. Well, while he was profusely thanking me over the emails here in the mid-90s that we'd just sort of figured out how to use an email back then, I sort of bravely said, I said, mate, we've got this band and, you know, we're stupid or whatever. But while he was thanking me, I asked him for the intro. And 3 weeks later, a DAT tape turned up with George Carlin's intro for our album that we put on the album. Wow. So I think all of the success, Nick, it just goes back to, I suppose, being brave enough to have a crack, being naive enough to do it for joy, not for remuneration, and I suppose a combination of naivety, bravery, maybe learning just enough to get some competency, but I never claimed to have got mastery in any of it. But yeah, that same principle that got George Carlin on our album, that got Phil Emanuel on our album, you know, it wasn't all hits. You know, I was this close. I was a flies far away because I went to the Steakhouse studio with Steve Lukather's studio from Toto in LA when I was just there on a holiday to go to Disneyland and stuff. And Luke wasn't there that day. They were recording, I think it was Toto 10 or Toto 20. It was one of the albums in about the mid-90s. And so, but I was swapping emails with Steve Lukather, and we were that close to having him play on our album just because I asked. You know, the song was called The Great Man. It was a tribute to Eddie Van Halen back then. He was friends with Eddie, and it just didn't end up happening. So it wasn't all hits, but I was never afraid to ask the question. And I've taken that in every career I've ever had. When you talk about George Carlin, I mean, to me, I think comedians that make political statements are so important. And if people talk about who would you have as your top dinner guests through life? There'd be three comedians I would definitely ask. One would be Bill Hicks. Oh, Bill's fantastic, isn't he? George Carlin and Dave Chappelle. To me, those three go beyond comedy. They actually challenge boundaries and make us think more about life than politicians do, a lot of musicians do. They are cultural and social shapists. And mate, the fact that you got to have that time with George Carlin, I think is amazing. Now, just to put things, people who are listening to this, to put it in perspective, you've taken that journey, and we're going to visit some of your music from the Hard Ways, which was your band that George did the introduction for them. We'll visit that in a while.
But mate, you've taken that ability to just meet people to the point where you've brought out some of the most famous people in the world to Australia. And wow, mate, who have you brought out?
Yeah, I mean, it was the same principle. I just started, one thing led to another after music. And while I was, doing music on the weekends, I didn't do anything during the week. Now, what I should have been doing was becoming a steward of my craft and learning all the things that you, Mr. Phillips, have mastered, but I didn't, right? So I'd sit around watching Oprah and doing nothing. So when a friend of mine said, hey, do you want to have a look at this real estate thing? Long story short, I got into real estate. I was above average at it, but I didn't like the way it was taught to me, cold calls and I hated it actually. So I learned marketing. I learned how to get people to do business with me in real estate without me having to cold call and annoy them. But in doing that, a lot of other agents wanted to learn it. So I started running seminars. So once again, never leave a question unasked, I'll never die wondering. So I started asking some of my heroes to come and speak at my events. And it started off asking people that would do it for free, like people who I'd learned marketing from. I'd ask them to come and speak at the event. And, instead of me paying them money, what would happen was if they were any good, someone would go up to them on the break and say, hey, do you want to, can I buy something from you? So they would sort of self-fund so I didn't have to pay them. Yeah. So that's how I started. But I'd ask those people. And then I'd start asking some of my mentors and heroes like John McGrath, Eric Thomas, who was, a big speaker in America. And then, I suppose one of the speakers, and Eric Thomas was the one who asked the question, he asked me, what would your goals be if you couldn't fail? And I was running a nicely profitable, not world-beating, but a good little seminar business teaching marketing to real estate agents primarily. And Eric asked that question, a magic question. What would your goals be if you could not fail? And with the safety of that caveat, I suppose, with that safety net of if you couldn't fail, well, if I couldn't fail, I'd have my childhood hero, Arnold Schwarzenegger, speak at this event, and now, and then another speaker at a different event said, what would your goals be if you couldn't fail was one wording of it. And then the other speaker said, if you weren't afraid, what would your goals be if you weren't afraid? And to me, that was the same question, just different wording. And the answer was, once again, have Arnold Schwarzenegger, be in business with Arnold, have him come and speak at my event. He's an inspiration, but now I'm back in the real world. I can fail, and of course, I am afraid to even set that as a goal, but with the safety of that wording of those questions from those speakers, and I thank them to this day for allowing the wording of that question to allow me the safety of putting that goal out there. And, okay, I had to work for it, and I had to, as you mentioned in the book, I was very raw. I sort of put my heart on my sleeve. If you've read that book, Nick, you know me better than my family know me. So, I haven't read the book. It ended up working out well, The family haven't read the book? I'm sure they have. Yeah, I'm sure they have. So, mate, you brought Arnold out. So what did you bring him out for? What did he do? To speak at a conference, at an event on how to be more successful. Now, primarily my audience is real estate agents, because that's what I was one of them that didn't like the way they did their business. So I started training people to do it a better way, to not annoy people with cold calls and with the way that I was taught, and I started teaching. So to have Arnold come along as like an inspirational speaker to talk about the principles that he'd used to become successful, not only in, like that man had the goal to be a world famous movie star before he could speak English. So he was a little skinny kid in Thal in Austria, and he had the goal to become what Arnold Schwarzenegger ended up becoming without any right to. So to hear the rules, he's got these rules, these principles that he used to be the world's best in category number one, so bodybuilding. And then he used the same rules and principles to get to be number one in category two, which is his acting Hollywood megastardom career. And if the Constitution of the United States was a little bit different, it is my firm opinion that we would have been addressing him as President Schwarzenegger, because the highest political office he can hold in his adopted country of America is governor of the greatest state in America, in his opinion, in California. And so he ended up succeeding at running the biggest economy in the world when it comes to a state, which is California.
But mate, there's a big hole here you've got to explain. So you've got Glenn Twiddle, who's gone from USO to doing real estate to doing training of real estate agents and marketing. Suddenly got Arnold Schwarzenegger out here. Now, for people listening to this, there's like a missing link here. Now, was it just a matter of money for him, or was it the matter of the relationship you did, or that you put yourself on the line he respected? What were the things that took your goal to a reality?
Yeah, everything had to line up. Look, I'm just glad I was crazy enough to do it, because I approached it first off. You've got to find who to ask, because you can't just go www.arnoldschwarzenegger.com and say, hey, how much to hire you, dude? It can't be done, I had this goal with no right to achieve it, but well, it's out there. I better find out what it would take. When I first sort of put the goal out there, with the safety of if you couldn't fail and if you're not afraid, I originally just wanted to get a quote of what it would cost, just to almost have an excuse if I didn't do it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, not even almost. That is why I genuinely thought, because years before I'd heard that Donald Trump spoke in Sydney and his bill was $2 million to speak. Mm-hmm. And with that as the number, and I thought to myself, well, here I've got this goal. There is no way, because Arnold Schwarzenegger is more famous than Donald Trump. And so if Arnold is even $2 million or even $1 million, the mathematics of me running and having this goal is irresponsible. It's like, me being a musician saying my goal is to, take Richie Sambora's place. When while Bon Jovi's at the top of their game, that's how, crazy that goal would have been if the bill was $1 million or $2 million. So with that in mind, when I started looking to try and find out who to even ask what it would take to have Arnold Schwarzenegger speak, I was thinking that this was a fruitless goal that would never be able to happen, ever, 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 because the numbers just don't add up, the finances. So the scary thing ended up happening, because, and if you remember, I said I was somewhat, not a world beater by any means, but when I finally found the right people who represented him, asked the question, they said no. I went back with another question, was, well, what would have to happen then for it to be a maybe, and that was a pretty powerful question that I'm glad I asked. I didn't just take no for an answer. What would have to happen and they said, well, if the money was, enough, and if it was convenient to us, and maybe if we were in the region. So I started staying in touch with them somewhat intermittently, just looking for the time that they'd be in the maybe Australia Pacific region or somewhere, Asia somewhere or whatever, who knows? But the no turned to a probably not, and the probably not turned to a, well, no, but a no, but, and then it turned to a maybe if, and, and then at the end of the day, it came down to really two things. The fanboy energy that I asked with, I wasn't being a corporate tosser. Yep. I was asking with fanboy admiration. I truly was. And I mean, you see, we're on audio only. I'm just, on the visuals of this podcast, I'm surrounded by, his memorabilia, even in this room, because I am a fan. It wasn't a fake fanboy. I can quote his movies off by heart, and so there was that, combined with the ability to, remunerate what it would take to have a superstar like that take a week out of his time, flying out to Australia, and all of those things. That's not a cheap thing when you're talking about an AA plus, possibly one of the most famous humans on the planet. So a combination of being able to remunerate, with whatever the costs involved are, a venue of six figures, talent, and all of marketing, everything. It's a huge financial undertaking. So it's a combination of being able to barely find a way to make that financial commitment, combined with fanboy enthusiasm. Those were the two. I do believe that remove any one of those things, if I'd have had checkbook but not attitude, like the right attitude that asked in the right way with the right level of humility and kind of fandom, I don't think it would have worked. And a fanboy with no money wouldn't have worked either.
I'd like to maybe suggest a shift of terminology there from fanboy to, okay, sure, you're a fan. That's understandable, and he was an inspiration. But I think those type of people get hit by fans all the time. What they do respond to, and I found this in China, mate, when I was doing my stuff in China and I was meeting some very serious Chinese government officials and people in those circles, they really respond to genuineness. So it's one thing to be a fan, but it's one thing to be speaking from a point of view that you really want to work with this person from a point of genuine outcomes. You're not trying to manipulate the situation. You're not playing corporate games, because that's what they're surrounded by. Same thing with China. They're always sitting across the table from somebody. When they don't have to sit across the table from somebody, but can sit beside somebody and try and work on something genuine together, I think it's amazing how much of a leap of faith people in those positions will take to do something genuine rather than try and play the games.
Yeah, well, I'd absolutely agree with that. And I think I got but I also don't see that the word fanboy is in any way a negative.
But he's got lots of fans, is my point. Got lots of fans.
and like I said, just fandom.
Yeah.
With that, admiration.
Yeah.
Without some reason to do the thing that is more than just me wanting to hang out with my hero.
Separates you from the crowd. It gives you a point of difference for them that says, yeah, this is different. This is a journey you can take, because at their heart, most successful people are just average Joes who've fallen into a position where they've landed at. And they're mostly 100%. Driven by the fact from where they started from. They want to actually do something cool. They want to do something fun. And so when they find someone who's very earthy, who wants to take that journey, and that's exactly what I found with the Chinese government officials I was with. The fact that we have this perception of what the Chinese government people are like. But the fact that they could actually talk to someone, I wasn't a threat there. I was a musician there. I was a curiosity factor. I'd achieved chart success. And they assumed I was highly connected to do that. When they found out I wasn't, it was more like I became a bit of a drinking buddy. And that led to a lot of amazing conversations. It's a great leveler. And I think the journey you went through at the same time with Arnold was probably a great leveler. Whereas you started with this huge gulf between you, but probably became actually, from a personality point of view, much closer.
Yeah, and it happened really quick, because him in particular is a very, very charismatic and I'm sure maybe he doesn't turn it on. Well, no, he turns it on with everyone, but I don't know but we got on famously quickly. I remember he made a joke and I cracked up laughing. So in every Terminator movie, there's a line. And so Nick, what rating is your podcast? What's Gasbaggin as far as a rating?
I don't care.
G, is it PG?
Yeah, no, whatever. No, it's just made us.
Okay,
whatever.
Cool. Because there's a little bit. This is MA. It's not it's not R. It's not X. It's MA.
Mate, we're fucking Aussies here, okay? So it's all right.
So so I was saying to Arnold after we'd sort of broken the ice and I'd calmed down a little bit out of scaring myself to death. So when we first met downstairs, Arnold, I said, I was so nervous. It was like when you met Reg Park, because having read his autobiography.
This is at his house, right? You went to his house, correct?
No, this is in Brisbane at the event. Okay. So this is first meeting. Right. And so I said, when you met Reg Park, I remember you talked about it in your book, and remember when you read Reg Park, how nervous you are. Well, that was me downstairs when I first met you, and I didn't know whether I should play it cool or whether I should say, "Come with me if you want to live," right? and because that's the line in Terminator. In every Terminator, it's "Come with me if you want to live."
Yeah.
And he said, "No. The new one is this. It's live with me if you want to come." Right. And his partner Heather said, "Arnold, stop that." Like, she chastised him for being rude with me, right? He goes, "Oh, just it's just us boys talking," So he told his partner, his partner after his wife Maria, who's been with ever since for years now, and he put her in her place and said, "It's okay, it's just us boys," and us boys. That was me and him having a little chat. So that was pretty bloody cool. So
mate, beyond Arnie, who else have you brought out here?
Well, once I got a taste for it, and like at that event, Arnold and I did get friendly. He invited me to his house, and we played cards, and we went to the gym together. We hung out. It was awesome. So I got a taste for it. I thought, oh well, if that's possible, what else is? So I made this list. Still got it. 20 people that I'd love to have worked with, and I had Richard Branson on there as my entrepreneurial hero. Had Gary Vaynerchuk on there as my marketing hero. Eddie Murphy's on there. Oprah, Michael J. Fox. I'll embarrassingly admit, when I first made the list, and it was long ago, things have come to light now where he's off the list. But Bill Cosby was on the list. Not too.
Mate, we couldn't see that. None of us saw that coming.
Couldn't see that one coming. Yeah. So yeah, but I made this list, and I sort of applied this. Michael Jordan was on the list, and I did get through to Michael Jordan's people, and I got a big, fat, resounding go away. and when I asked the question, I thought, okay, so my magic question was, well, what would have to happen, right? The same question that worked with Arnold. If you could be laughed at via an email set of communications saying nothing could happen for it to be not a no, like nothing. so that's still a work in progress, the one with Michael Jordan. But
mate, you've done some of that list, right?
Well, Richard Branson was at the top of that list. He was the first person I wrote on the list because he's been my entrepreneurial hero. And so I went to, because this was 2015 was the first time we brought Arnold to Australia. We've done so a couple of times since. Richard Branson, so Arnold was in 2015. And so I wanted Richard, if we could, heaven forbid, maybe make it happen in an ideal world, I started looking for people for 2016. Because when you put all this money, nearly $1 million was my last big event. Again, and Arnold was our headliner down in Sydney that time. The bill was $850,000. So when you get over, the first time wasn't quite that much because I didn't get quite as extravagant, and it was all on a shoestring. But the first Arnold one, it was still north of 5 though, $500,000. So I was just barely broke even on the thing, right? And I was, thank God so I start looking for what we could do maybe in a year's time after I've recouped and figured out what to do and all of that. And so Richard Branson was one of the people we connected with, as was Michael J. Fox, as was Michael Jordan. Oprah's people just ignored me completely. They didn't even get back to me with the sod off. So, but Richard Branson's people came back after a little bit of toing and froing, saying, well, at this time, we're not going to be anywhere near the Asia Pacific region or Australia or anything in 2016, as you've requested. But, and I quote, and I must have read this email 100 times, but it would be great if we could do something in September 2015. So this is only like a matter of months after we've just wiped our brow and gotten done with the Arnold thing. Yeah. And I've got Sir Richard Branson saying he wants to play months later. And I'm like, I can't say yes to this, but I can't say no. So I said yes again, and off we were to the races again. So
mate, after night time, do you actually flail yourself with whips on your back just for fun, or is it like?
But I tell you what, man, I did think to myself on both of those occasions where I was putting it all on the line monetarily. I did so because I've read all Richard's books multiple times, listened to his trainings, listened to his audios, like literally, and what happened was when the Richard thing came along, it was one of his quotes that did it. And the quote is, if you're presented with amazing opportunity and you don't know whether you can do it, say yes and figure it out along the way. So I had to, but I did think to myself, because another one of Richard's principles is mitigate the downside, manage the risk so that if it all goes to hell in a handbasket, no one's going to be jumping off the Story Bridge. No one's going to be, So I thought to myself, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? I'm going to lose a house. Well, they can't take the brain away from me. You know what I mean? I've got a good marketing brain that knows what it's doing in order to get another house, in order to, I'll never starve. You know what I mean? So I thought if I go down hiring any one of my heroes, that'll be a great story to tell on Nick Phillips gasbagging in 10 years' time or whatever, Right, so that was my thinking. It was, if it all goes to shit, am I okay? And I thought, yes, I am. So let's go all in.
Yeah. Yesterday, I did a gasbagging session with a guy called Alan Cooney. And Alan's a friend of mine. He's got an amazing Queensland story, and I hope people have listened to it. But Alan's one of these people that's been very kind of adventurous in his life, but from a CEO position, and he puts a lot of thought behind what he does. So he doesn't just go out there blindly and do stuff. But a quote he made in the whole chat we were having was that beyond the fear, that's where the fun starts. And I thought that was a great statement. And I've actually quoted it in my little introduction to the podcast. Beyond the fear, that's where the fun starts. I mean, I think that's a big part of what you've done in every step of the way. You know, and one of the things that amazes me while you're working with all these big people and bringing them out, the fact that you actually go out and train real estate agents. Now, I'm going to put a lot of people offside here and say that I've met some nice real estate agents, but I've met a lot of cocky real estate agents, mate. And the fact that you're going out and training them, how do you get them into that mindset?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a niche play within the real estate space because a lot of them are that, and my style of wanting to, meet a home seller under the guise of anything. Because think about it, with real estate, we need them maybe once every 5 to 7 years, and yet they market to most consumers as if they need them every week. So I teach out of the box thinking that you should be getting the attention and the relationship with your marketplace in really any other way other than listing and selling a house, because most of the time, 99.9% of their life, they don't need you for that. So I suppose the way I do things almost repels the type of real estate agent you're describing, and attracts those outliers, maybe like me and like many of my best students who want to do it a different way, who don't want to be hated. There was a Reader's Digest did a study on which professions in the world are most trustworthy, and nurses and doctors and authors and things of that nature were at the top, and real estate agents and politicians and sex workers were down the bottom. And in fact, I got some notoriety and I got on on a Current Affair, and I was in Courier Mail and all of that because I put out a press release saying real estate agents less trustworthy than sex workers. And it was because sex workers was like 48 and real estate agents was 49.
Well, now thankfully you've got bankers, so the bankers sit well below everyone else. And
absolutely.
I remember in the late 80s, it must have been one of the first times I tried to get some type of insurance policy for, I don't know what it was for, life, health insurance, life or something rather. Literally one of the questions on the whole thing they had to fill out was, have you been convicted of drugs? Are you convicted of sex trafficking? Are you a musician?
Oh, God, really?
That was literally one of the questions back then. So,
that's who they lumped us in with. Well, lumped you guys in with, because at the time I wasn't one, and many would argue I never became one.
No, don't go down that road. You were great. Speaking of which, now I'm going to ask if we can have a little bit of a break here to actually play a song. And if we could play a Hardway song, which is your band that you had off that album you're talking about, where George Carlin introduced it, we could play that. And when we come back, I'm happy to talk more about what you've done with the big guys and all that. But I would like to investigate the things you're teaching people. Is it just something for real estate agents? It seems to me there can't be that many real estate agents in Australia. There must be a message you're getting across to other people as well who want to learn sales and marketing skills or people personality skills. And then I think, mate, from just some of the chats we've had, we could probably solve a good majority of the problems in the world if we chat about them for a bit. So are you up for going down a few rabbit holes or whatever?
Of course, my man. Like always, mate, I've been a follower of yours, mate, so I will absolutely, where you go, I will follow, my good man.
No, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. But let's play one of these tracks. Now, can you tell me which track you're going to send me to play?
Oh, my goodness. I want to send Not in This Life, my bad cover of a Nick Phillips song.
You did a great cover.
No, I won't do that.
I'll play that.
Because they've got the real version, which is...
Yeah. No, let me say. Glenn, you did a couple of covers of my songs. You did Someone to Be Kind To as well, didn't you?
I did. I never recorded that one, though, but I learnt it. I used to play it at every gig that I did because I loved so many of your songs. And I remember back in the day, mate, and this is credit to you. You weren't just a muso. you were a marketer. You weren't just a performer. You weren't just a songwriter. You weren't just a recording artist and live artist. You were a marketer because you used to put tablatures out there to your original work out there in the ether. And us crazies like me could get the G and the B minor and we could learn a Nick Phillips song. So I went and did so. I remember you used to understand the principle of building a database by giving away a guitar that you invested in. And if you went and saw a Nick Phillips show, you'd get the email address and you could win a Maton guitar. It was really clever.
It wasn't an email address back then. We actually had a mailing list where we would take a week. I think in Brisbane, we got like a couple of thousand people on our mailing list. And we would literally have to spend a week stuffing envelopes and spending money to get stamps to send it out to people. But we ran some things like at Her Majesty's, one of the bars I played at, we had the Her Majesty, the mobile party unit we put together, which was a bit of a club that came about. And I think that's a great thing about music is people don't just want to always just hear music. They like to feel like they're a part of it. And
a fellowship, absolutely.
Yeah. And that's what I worked on, was that grassroots thing. But mate, when you hear someone who's a friend of yours, who you respect with what they do, take the time to learn your song. And mate, I haven't had the hit songs. I haven't had the hits out there where every man his dog plays your song at the cover gig, you know. But to have a mate learn your song and play it, it's really made a respect here, buddy. I was very moved by that. So thank you very much.
Well, and similarly on the same note, to have a person that you see as a performer for you, you know, someone that you have up on a pedestal, become a mate, and then have such talent that those songs are equally as good and memorable as anything you're hearing on the radio. Well, just like I'd learn a Copperhead Road or a Gary Moore song or whatever, well, I'd learn my favorite artists, and Nick Phillips was there. So, and you know, when you released the Australian Pride event, and Jeff Fennick, by the way, I've got to hook you up with Jeff for a Gasbagging episode, because Jeff Fennick spoke at one of my events. Oh, wow, you know, and I told him about this song that I used to play, because I played Australian Pride as well, and I told him about there's a mate of mine who wrote a verse for you, you know, and you got to hear it some stage. So, so no, it was an equally an honor for me to have a mate who was just one of the best wordsmiths and songwriters, you know, that the world's ever seen, in my opinion, an unsung hero of Australian talent. I just
have to do a little caveat on that. I got involved in writing that song, but a guy called Ricky Semper from Caboolture actually wrote Australian Pride, and he gave me the right to be involved in write. So I just like to credit him when I can, because, mate, people don't know that too much, but it was a great song. And mate, if I ever get the chance to be introduced to Jeff, that would be just amazing. Thank you very much. That'd be fantastic. But mate, we're not sure what song we're going to play here, but it's going to be a hardware song.
Let's throw on. I reckon. I'm trying to think of a Nick Phillips-esque song. Let's go with "Keeping the Dream Alive," because it truly is a song that, and I don't even know. I don't think I stole it from John Laws. I thought I came up with it independently. I did think I did. But then when I saw the John Laws, after I'd recorded the song and the band had recorded the song and I'd written and all of that with my co-writer friend, Matt Farthing, I saw John Laws, and I reckon it might have been one of those unconscious things that I'd heard it but didn't know to quote John Laws or something. But "Keeping the Dream Alive" is one of my favorites, and I liked to think this is the closest I was ever going to get to Bon Jovi, a power ballad.
Beautiful, mate. While we're listening, I'm going to top up a wine, you grab a beer, whatever, and we'll continue on after the song, okay?
Beautiful, mate.
I went to sleep happy in love, my bed beneath and an angel above. As I slipped away from the world, I thought I knew. How was I to know? All I dream of was you. To face a new day and face my friend, I knew that my vision had met its end. And the only thing in the world that makes me feel alright my bed. But then begins a journey in my head. My soul's imaginary sight presents your shadow to my view. It makes black night beautiful when the road face new. So I'm keeping the dream alive. I'm trying so hard to survive. The love that I found was when I was asleep. It took a dream to find a love I could keep. So now I'm keeping my dream alive. So I'm keeping the dream alive. I'm trying so hard to survive. The love that I found was when I was asleep. It took a dream to find a love I could keep. So now I'm keeping my dream alive. So I'm keeping my dreams alive.
Good. I don't know what I did then, but okay. So Glenn, mate, we thanks for the song, by the way.
Well, there you go. I'm embarrassed to have played that in the presence of Nick Phillips. I can tell you that much for free.
Sure. For sure. Mate, I'm really enjoying my space at the moment. So yeah, I'm doing my Sunshine State of Mind show and looking at writing songs from people within the communities, and it's really inspired me. You know, it's taken me back to, I probably had the last decade. I got taken away a little bit from my passion, which is that, you know, that songwriting about people within communities. But now I'm in the heart of soul of it again. I'm really loving it. So as much as it's been a challenge with the whole COVID thing, reinventing myself a little bit to have a show that I think is marketable at this time and a concept which I think has community value to it has been, it's re-energized me. So I'm enjoying that.
Yeah,
But, mate,
and what I've loved though about watching you, mate, is you always are writing about stories and people, and almost is I don't even know if the word troubadour is right, but a classic singer-songwriter like a Slim Dusty that's a storyteller, like a John Williamson that's a storyteller. And that's certainly what I've always seen from you, is you're writing about the Northern Rivers or Fred Hollows, or different experiences and people with a grassroots feel, the Queensland pride song and things of that nature, Queensland days and things like that.
Well, I do think that in a song you've got maybe 3 to 4 minutes in a contemporary style song to connect with people's attention, to connect. They're giving you those few minutes of their time, of their life, and I think if they're kind enough to give you that part of that time of their life, you should say something that has some value. And so in each song I write, I do try and have something that maybe shares, maybe it's a little bit of me or a little bit of something that's just not just saying words, and that has always been my goal, to make sure that if people have given me 3 or 4 minutes of their time, I can actually hopefully give them something that's, of value in that time.
Well, that song we just listened to, Keeping the Dream Alive, that was a weird one, because I that time in the morning when you wake up, when you're half asleep, when you're not quite awake, but you're not quite asleep, right?
Midday.
Yeah, for you 2 or 3 a.m. finishes, mate, absolutely, yeah. But yeah, so I'd had a dream where there was this girl that worked at the casino with me.
Should we go on with this, or is it?
Yeah, no, it's more than G-rated, I can promise you. In reality, worked with her at the casino, and I was married at the time, or at least I was with my partner at the time. But anyway, but in this dream, me and this girl at the casino were in love. I mean, in love. But in real life, we weren't. And I genuinely can say I didn't have those feelings of, wow, if only I wasn't married, that'd be, no, we were just platonic. And yet in this dream, we were in love. And there was this moment when I woke up, when I was still half awake, half asleep, with those sleepy chemicals going around in my head, where I had this urge to call her, because in the sleep kind of state, I was in love with her. Now I was waking up, but I still had a bit of that. So I wanted to call her. But then, of course, when reality hit me, well, you're not going to call her, idiot. You were the one having a dream. She doesn't know anything about it. But I wanted to call her to talk about our relationship that was non-existent. There was nothing exist. So that's where that keeping the dream alive came up from. Was this weird phenomena.
A good mate of mine is a guy called Carl Brodie. Carl's probably one of the most talented singer-songwriters Australia's produced, I think. Well, he's Scottish by background, but unfortunately he passed away a couple of years ago now. But on one of his albums, he had a song called Sleepy Head, and it was written about being on a train ride from the city to his home, and this girl sitting next to him fell asleep on his shoulder. And it's like he writes his song about this possibly alternative life almost that they could have. And that's the thing, when you explore what you're saying in your dream, these are other realms of consciousness, but it's not like there's one person out there for us. You could have a very significant relationship across your life with multiple people. And it's just, we take certain journeys, you either make it work, you don't make it work, whatever, things happen, they change, whatever, you land up where you land. But
you ever listen to Tim Minchin, Nick?
Oh, yeah. But I don't know what you're referring to specifically, but I've listened to him quite a lot.
Well, Tim's got this song where he's talking about that phenomena, about how, even though he's with one partner, his one girlfriend who became his wife, who is the only person he's ever slept with is his wife, and she gets his messed upness or whatever. But he said that if they ever broke up, he'd find someone else. There'd be someone else. And he says, he's not talking about relationships and the heart and love and all of that. He's talking about maths. Yep. That he just found someone who happened to be there geographically in all the world,
Well,
So,
I think that's an important point, because a lot of people, one of the big problems we have, and we're getting off script here maybe a bit or whatever, but I tend to
that's
do
what
that.
Gasbaggin's all about, Nick.
Exactly.
I know it. I can feel it.
Mate, one of the big issues we face in this country and this state is domestic violence. And you'll get so many people who will stay in a relationship because they've either been lost their self-confidence or they feel there's no one else out there for them or whatever. That's rubbish. I mean, there is someone out there for you. If you're in a situation where someone's abusing you and is not respecting you as a person and who you are, well, that's their loss, and that's, I understand from me on an outsider looking in, that's an easy thing to say. When you're in the middle of such a situation, it's much more difficult. But mate, it does lead me into saying what you do with training. And once again, I'm an outsider looking in, mate. I watch your talks, not all of them, but I've seen quite a few of your talks, and I haven't been to one of your sessions, but I think I've got an idea of what you're doing. But it does seem to me to be more than just about real estate sales. It seems to me you're almost crossing into life coach a little bit as well, and positive attitudes in life. Am I right? Or
I don't teach me anything about real estate sales because I don't know anything about that. When I was doing it, there was nothing I could have said to make someone buy or even influence really someone to make a decision like buying a house if they didn't want to buy the house. Yeah. I was just, and it's my opinion that the real estate agent is just some idiot. In my case, I'm going to say some bloke standing there who is giving themselves credit for selling a house when the buyer is selling themselves. Yeah. So everything that I sort of do in my training of them is about them being a more attractive entity, if you will, that is able to get the listings to sell. So say sales is we go down to the Good Guys or you go to a car yard or anything. That salesperson's job is to take their product and say to a person, hey, this is a really good product. Here's the features, here's the benefits, here's how to do it or whatever, right? That's sales. Real estate agents, that's not their job. All of their money is made in convincing Nick, hey, Nick, when you go to sell, use agent A over agent B. right? The sale will take care of itself. Now, there is something to be said. They need to be a skilled marketer to get multiple buyers into that property, and then a skilled negotiator when those one or more people are interested in buying that property to get the most money for the seller that engaged the agent. But that is the easier part of the equation to teach. The harder part of the equation is to be I use the word entity, and I don't know if that's the right word, but it's to be the agent that when life happens to a person, and, we talked about domestic violence. So, we're going along in our life. We're in a rosy marriage. We're at the 7-year mark. It gets a little less rosy. We're at the 14-year mark, and husband and wife decide to split up. So in that moment, when husband and wife decide to split up, our job as a real estate agent is to be the person that gets the phone call in to sell the house, and then the ability to market the property to get the multiple buyers in there and as many people into it as possible, in the hopes that one, potentially, and hopefully 2 or 3 or 4 or more fall in love with the property and want to buy it. But really, that's it. Okay, marketing and negotiation.
You're saying
not sales.
You're saying a big part of what you're talking about is the role of the agent is to get the listing.
Correct.
Right, the listing. Okay, mate. Well, I'm going to think you're like the Shark Tank or whatever it's called here, and pitch you an idea, if that's okay.
Shoot.
I'm
the easiest mark in the world, though. When it comes to you, Jesus Christ, I'm an easy mark.
Well, here's the thing, and look, you might want to make sure that people in real estate never listen to this Gasbaggin thing or whatever. Yeah, that's fine.
No, I say all this stuff to them, that any of them that think that they're making sales out there, they're not. They're standing there giving themselves too much credit for buyers selling themselves. So all this stuff.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I agree with you about having the right listings is important, because you got the product, you're above the rest. But I think it's the same. There are certain service industries. There's like real estate, there's legal firms, there are accountants, there are things where people provide a service that is very similar to their competitor, right? They kind of, they usually have really good visual brands and websites. They spent the money on getting their branding right. They have their people dressed right and looking very professionally and trained right. And their receptionist is always very well spoken. They look the part. They all look very similar. The thing that makes a difference is, as you've pointed out, their listing. If they've got the properties that people want, that makes sense. People want to go to them. But I think that in a lot of those companies, one of the things that makes a real difference is actually the heart and soul of the people at the core of the business. It's the principles that they've come up through. Maybe it's a legacy through their family or something else that they've poured into their business. And that's probably the hardest thing in the world to actually market, because you can't put it in a brochure. You can't say, I've got this house and this house, and by the way, here are my family values. It doesn't work that way. I think this is a space, it's part of what I've been trying to do, where if you could tell your story if you could share your principles and part of who you are, your heart and soul, with your core clients and encourage them to on-share that to their extended network, that would be a powerful tool. And I think a song is a way to do that. If you were a real estate agent and one of the things you're really passionate about was multiple sclerosis, right? You had something you cared about, or whatever else, whatever charity. You might want to have a song written and produced for you about that subject that actually people donate. It could be about someone's journey in that case, and you encourage people to download it, and they send their money when they download it to a charity. That becomes something that actually reflects your values and who you are. And that's something that your clients will probably want to share onto their friends and onto their friends. If that all came back to your platform, I think that could be a good marketing tool. Am I getting kicked out of the Shark Tank here, or is there something there? Or?
Not at all, no. And it taps into a bunch of principles that I already see as valid. So, the first one is, now, whilst you mentioned a charity might be the thing that is of passion, the thing that popped into my mind is, imagine if the passion that you had, you mentioned whatever the affliction that you mentioned was, MS, whatever the case may be. Instantly in my mind popped into my head was cystic fibrosis, and the Australian band the Wolverines had a song called 65 Roses, because this kid couldn't understand what cystic fibrosis was, and they were misinterpreting the word cystic fibrosis. Why has mum got 65 roses? Why is that bad?
Yep.
Right? What an amazing linguistic.
Mate, you don't put a song out that's just like talking about that disease. It's like Phil Collins' song "Another Day in Paradise," where he's talking about homelessness in a way that is telling a story.
Amazing.
That's the trick, is to tell a story in a song that captures people's imaginations, that they want to play in their car, they want to put on their playlist and everything else. But at the same time, it's got an underlying message that taps into people's consciousness and says, and if they associate that, if the song doesn't talk about your business, but it feels like your business, it feels like your brand, it feels like that taps into people's subconscious. Because the good thing about music and sound is that it bypasses the logical part of our brain, and it goes to the oldest part of our brain, and it triggers emotions and creates memories. And that's a really powerful thing to tap into marketing. And even the big companies, I don't see the big companies in this world using songs strategically that way, where a value. And I think that's a whole new area to explore. And that's one of the things I'm trying to do, and so.
And so what I would add, I would say is, it's absolutely the case, more and more so as audio becomes a bigger player in the marketing space. And it absolutely is, with the advent of things. Instead of, typing in on a phone, you're now able to say, okay, Google, play me a song on Spotify. Well, the next step of things like, and my phone just started responding when I said that, things
they're
like
listening,
Alexa.
mate, they're listening.
Things like Siri and Alexa and okay, Google, all of those things. The next step is, hey Siri, get me the local real estate agent. Audio is a big new field, even though it has been there forever.
Well, and one of the things I've tried for the moment, I'm not doing these gas bagging series with video because I'm not equipped to do it properly. And I think if you do things half-assed, why do it? I'd rather treat it like we're having a phone call, which we are doing, and let people join in. But also with audio, we've almost reached the point of saturation with video. There's so many hours in a day you can watch a screen. But where audio is discovering such a growth, whether it's through podcasts or music or whatever else, is you can still listen to audio when you're driving, when you're exercising, when you're falling asleep, when you're picking up the kids, when you're doing your work. You don't have to be watching a screen. And that's, I think, where that growth is coming through. And that's something people need to realize, because audio is the first thing we hear when we're born and the last thing when we die. It's the last thing we hear. And it creates this soundtrack to our lives. And
100%.
And I think it's a new area of exploration. It's the new Wild West a little bit. But I've gone off on my little tangent there, mate. But sorry about that.
Well, but then I would even add is that you're not, I love the direction you're going, because not only are we entering, I suppose, almost a renaissance of audio. That's at least my opinion. With things like Siri and with things like
it's always been there. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. Well, I remember I didn't know this at the time, but as I got more into marketing, one of my favorite songs of all time was Walking in Memphis. And I only know about walking about 10 feet off of Beale Street. I only know about Beale Street because of that song. I only know about, the Elvis and all of, of course I know about Elvis, but, all of the things about Union Avenue and all of those lyrics in Walking in Memphis, that started off as a jingle to promote tourism in the town of Memphis and became a global phenomenon, where it started with someone like Nick Phillips, Mark Cohn, I believe his name was, writing a song about the town.
Wow.
Took over the world, And
but you know what one of our first jingles here in Australia was?
Love You Brisbane.
No. Going back to the late 1800s.
Up there, Kazali.
No. There was a guy called Andrew who wrote this song with Christina, and it was about a strike that happened around the wool industry, and it was a famous song called Waltzing Matilda. Now, what happened was Andrew Banjo Patterson, he wrote that. He sold that song with a bulk of other poems he'd written quite cheaply, because he didn't think much of it really. He sold it to Angus and Roberts. And they actually, I think it was £5 or something like that, they sold the package for. And at one stage, they licensed it to the Billy Tea Company. And the Billy Tea Company, they changed the original words around and the music around a bit. And they wrote that music on the packaging of the tea. So people would play it on their piano and it was like the local jingle, and that's the Waltzing Matilda we know today, which we sing off the Billy Tea thing. The original one I do in my show, Sunshine State of Mind. So people need to come along and see that original one. But yeah, that was one of our first jingles, Waltzing Matilda. And hey, we're still singing it.
And there's definitely there's nothing disrespectful about, because what one person calls a jingle, Mark Cohn calls a global audio meme that gets into the psyche that everyone knows. So whether it is that or whether it's the Newcastle song, the "Don't You Ever Let a Chance Go," a lot of those things might even have had some commercial intent, and yet they've still become part of our everyday life. So I think it's a phenomenal idea, Nick. And if brands and here's the one last principle I would say you're on the right track with. One of my most successful agents all of my successful agents who have used these principles to get to the top of their area have gotten well known in their area through things other than their real estate success. Like one of my guys who came to mind when you were talking about something you're passionate about, it wasn't a charity, but his thing is bull riding. Right. And Jesse James out in the Redlands runs a bull ride every year, where most of those years for like 3 or 4 or 5 years in a row, he got on a bull and rode a bloody bull. I went and saw his event a couple of times. I went to the event, this bull ride. I'm not into bull riding, but he's my man, so I went and supported him. And here he is riding this bull called bloody Widowmaker or whatever. 4,000-5,000 local residents in his area come and see not only not even him. They're not there for him. They're there for a full-on world-class bull riding event called the Grassroots Bull Riding Event. And what's it got to do with listing and selling real estate? Nothing.
It's selling your personality and who you are and your heart and soul. And that's what I'm saying.
100%.
I'm sure this can be done through lots of ways, whether it's bull riding or other events. But I think songs and music are one channel that hasn't been explored. People still think of it in terms of music, in terms of jingles, novelty songs, and backing tracks. They've gone the way of the dinosaurs, I think, because nowadays that's all advertising and people are kind of blocking out more ads than they absorb. We need to find new ways. And the thing is, we're absorbing more songs because of streaming and everything else than ever before. So let's take those things that people are absorbing, create something that reflects your brand, but touches the heart and soul of your clients and encourages your clients to become your old style word of mouth marketing team by on sharing that forward. And I think there's things to explore there. And my goal with that is to see, okay, well, from a songwriter and a musician's point of view, is there a new income stream to develop there? And how we can, I can work with young artists, train them to write those type of songs. Can we find a new income stream for artists? Because, mate, from my industry's point of view, it's really tough at the moment to see where survivable income is going to come from.
Yeah, I would even say, though, even if the word jingle maybe has some connotations of, of negativity, I would even say, sure, call it a jingle, call it a song, but so long as it's good quality musicianship with memorable lyrics and, and melody and harmony and well performed and well written and contains heart and soul, call it a jingle, call it a song, so long as the community remember it and associate your brand with a positive emotion and some feeling, one man's jingle is another man's walking in Memphis.
Well, it's an asset that connects people to your business through an emotional response and empowers those people to become part of your marketing team by on sharing your activities, as long as you then centralize all activity back to your website, your platform, so that people are being drawn back to your point. And it's about relationship building. So when they do get to that 14-year situation, well, they know that they can go and talk to that real estate agent because, look, they're not just selling real estate, they're actually helping MS, or they're helping this cause, or they've given more than just putting an ad up or a brand up. They've shared part of who they are with people.
Well, even look at We Are the World, Nick. I mean, that had commercial intent. No two ways about it. That had commercial intent and changed the world,
Exactly.
with the world's best. So certainly if there's some talent behind the execution, then the sky potentially could be the limit for a brand that has a story to tell. But what I can promise you, Nick, is certainly from my industry, and this is certainly not only the real estate industry, maybe not even the real estate industry, because finding the right ones that are open-minded enough for this sort of thinking potentially might be difficult to find, maybe
Absolutely.
not. But what I would say is that with the right execution and stuff, anything is possible. But what I would say is for my industry, though, that heart, that soul, that connection, that skill will never be if it's related to listing and selling houses with such an anesthetic. No, what's the word? What's the word where there's no kind of heart to it?
It's
sterile.
Sterile.
Yeah, clinical.
Yeah.
It's never going to happen with the clinical listing and selling of blah 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 of real estate transactions.
Yeah.
However, home is something like even Bon Jovi had a song, in more recent times than back in the day, called "This House Is Not for Sale." Mm-hmm. But that song still had heart and was a hit. So it had musicianship. And, imagine if that was written by a bloody real estate company.
And you don't want the this is probably not good for getting people to seminars, but you don't want the bulk of people doing it. You don't bulk of businesses doing it, because then that becomes the norm. You actually want those businesses
exactly right.
that are interested to step outside the box and separate themselves and give themselves a market advantage by being different. And that's brave people, man. That's brave. But there are brave people out there. And I think that's one of the things tapping into what I said with Alan Cooney, getting beyond the fear is where the fun starts, and I think that's definitely the vibe I get about what you're encouraging people to do in sharing a part of themselves or exposing their heart and soul rather than just their brand.
Yeah. Well, not even rather than just, most of the brands, if those who's to be trusted statistics are correct, the fact is their brand is the last thing they should be showcasing. Now, sure, I'm only saying that half with tongue in cheek, in that you've got to have a company, I suppose.
No, look at the banks, mate. Yeah, they got great branding, but who's trusting the banks at the moment?
But the world hates them.
Yeah.
So, we better be doing something other than our brand, because if we're relying on a thing that the world universally despises, we're going to come up short a whole lot of the time.
Man, well, now we're talking about politicians. We move from bankers to politicians and despising and everything else.
Well, from drunken musicians to bloody saving the world politically, Nick.
Well,
hey,
mate,
I love it.
Mate,
when did we grow up, Nick? I don't want to.
I think drunken musicians might do a better job at the moment. Unfortunately, a lot of people might will definitely disagree with me on this because they haven't seen it firsthand, but then they've just seen what we've been exposed to. But the games that are going on at the moment between our government being caught between America and China, and the political games with the China situation, mate, I can't believe we're putting our trade of so many industries in such jeopardy at a time on the back of a coronavirus thing and everything else, where we're playing political games at the expense of so many businesses here. It's just, I don't get it.
I wish I was more informed, Nick, and I'm not. And that's where I've held my tongue a little bit, even though I have opinions. Mm-hmm. I keep them to myself because I haven't done the effort to know what the stakeholders have in their world. Sure, when our borders were closed and it affected my ability to see my kids at all who are in New South Wales.
Because you've been going between Perth and New South Wales and Queensland and juggling everything.
Yeah, but yet the New South Wales border restriction stopped me from seeing my kids for a period of multiple months. Wow. And I may have had a personal opinion that I didn't necessarily like that. But I wasn't out there spouting that opinion because I didn't do the due diligence where I felt I was doing so with responsibility. So I didn't like it, but I left it to the stakeholders. As much as I disagreed with it for personal reasons, I did look into some of the, the statistics where I would see, on the Australian Bureau of Statistics website, I would see 3,000 flu pneumonia deaths every single year, and we're still not at that with COVID. So those sorts of numbers did make me think that this time last year, for the year of 2019, we had seen 3,000 people die of flu pneumonia, And 2020, we have seen less than that die of COVID, and zero basically die of flu and pneumonia. So yeah, those things annoy me and make me think.
Well,
but I never went out there.
Well, you got people looking at the American situation, how terrible that is. But the point is, there seems to be different strands. There seems to be different temperature zones where things work out with. What frustrates me is that we haven't had those in-depth discussions of the science that they're coming out with. It's all been about, okay, we found some cases, let's lock this area down. Well, let's see, like, okay, in Queensland, we seem to be trying to be very proud up here that, we've done so well with it. But personally, and I don't have the science behind this. I'm just an idiot musician putting my thoughts out there. But I think we've been very lucky with our weather up here. I think there's something about everything going on here that has protected us a bit. And yeah, I would just like to hear a discussion about, okay, we see now that Victoria in their colder weather, their older people were really exposed. How do we start planning to make sure that those people that are in the most dangerous situations, we protect them better and let the rest of society get on with running the society? And I don't have the answer to that, but I would like to have that discussion in the community, in the public arena, rather than just politicians making decisions to lock things down. Because, mate, where we're at the moment, if we do go back into the lockdown, everything else, this tsunami of hurt, of mental health and financial health on the horizon is going to just be overwhelming us. And I'm really worried about that.
Yeah, me too, man. And I wish no, I don't wish because I haven't got the temperament, I don't believe, to affect change, because I can't handle the aggro. The one thing that I thought was the biggest shame, I suppose, about all of this, I mean, the thing that I regret most is the unprecedented level of, if you disagree with me, we've got to fight.
Yeah.
And the world out there, especially with the prevalence of social media, just literally yelling at each other from the top of their lungs or from the top of their keyboards, like common courtesy went out the window.
I befriended so many people just from the point of view I could see they were stocked up with fear, and I wasn't wanting to take that relationship into a worse place. So I just said, okay, just out of here with that relationship.
Yeah, it was crazy. And yeah, but I agree with you, mate, I like, it really frustrated me that there were 0 cases of COVID in Coffs Harbour where my kids are, and I couldn't go and see them because of an arbitrarily drawn line at the Gold Coast that if I crossed over, could not come back. Yeah. So that was some challenge to me. But then when I'd hear so much opinion one way or other, when I'd watch 3 hours of Joe Rogan with a lady called Rhonda Patrick talking about statistics, saying that of everyone who passed away of COVID, they were 94% of them, or some other really, really high percentage of them, were deficient in vitamin D. Yeah. And of the people who survived, if you were sufficient in vitamin D, it was like a 0.000004. Like, they gave some compelling statistics that said vitamin D was a thing, which is in line with what you just said.
You're not sitting there saying that's right. You're just saying, well, I think you're agreeing with me.
Why are we not
talking about it? Exactly. Exactly.
Yep. And I didn't hear any Australian politicians say, go and get vitamin D supplementation.
Or hearing a doctor talk about it, hearing someone of our medical experts talking about it.
Didn't hear anyone. No. And all I heard was follow the science. And then when the World Health Organization says we don't recommend lockdowns, they don't do anything but kick the can down the road. Now, they didn't use those languages, but that's what they said. Well, we're not following the science. We follow the science, but only when we like the science.
Exactly.
If you're going to follow the science, you got to follow the science. And
then you get into the realm where it does become very politically advantageous for leaders to be seen to be strong leaders in those times and taking a lockdown stance, and except when it comes up to election times and football finals, and those just then trip you further.
Yeah, that did my head in, mate. I tell you, when we'd have 30,000 people, and I still don't know where I sit about whether it the football is a good thing or a bad thing, but when 1 week, and again, I might be personally sooking because I can't go see my kids for a couple of months. Fair enough.
That's reality.
And other people can't go to funerals and some really horrific, heartbreaking things. But then a week later, it's okay to do it. Like, that did my head in, and it did make me think. But then I also did think, mate, I'm glad I'm not in those positions where it's almost like some of those politicians would be damned if they do, damned if they don't. So it's almost like this lockdown was just them saying, screw it, I ain't taking the chance. You bastards can stay at home maybe, because I ain't going to roll the dice.
Maybe, but mate, I am hungry for hearing some politicians these days that generally speak their mind. I just feel that so much is wrapped up in research, political research, what the party line is. And
Yeah.
I don't know any politician really at the moment who speaks their mind, what they're
Yeah.
saying. And in saying that, politicians can be wrong, but I'd like to hear someone with heart and soul. But anyway, I've just seen it in the music industry, mate. There's been, I've been trying to raise a flag a little bit through some of my discussions I think we need to look at how we can restructure the industry, not at the big level, because it's one of those industries that will always succeed at the big level by big money and the popularity of big artists. Big artists will always sell hundreds of millions of dollars of product, no matter what the format, no matter who it is. Sony's top artists will make a lot of money. But the only way you get Sony's top artists, and here in Queensland, the reason we have Keith Urban came out of this area, or Powderfinger, or Savage Garden, is because around that time, just prior to that, we had such a fertile grassroots industry. But now, and that was because we could go out and do gigs. We could do 5-7 gigs a week and make our money out of performing and doing it. That doesn't exist for the kids now. Those markets don't exist. And I see no assistance from the government in helping develop that grassroots industry. They might put some COVID money into this project or that project, but I would love to see a system whereby maybe artists are getting support where if you're a venue, you're a pub, and you can have your poker machines working till 5 o'clock in the morning, and you're making money off people who can't really afford it or whatever else, maybe you should be able to put a musician on that night to earn some money. And that money could maybe get paid to a central organization where some money goes to tax, some goes to super. They help the artists get organized, because, mate, while we're creatives, I panic at looking at a bank statement. I'm not good at those financial things. I'd love to see some discussion about how do we take the gig economy and build it on some foundations that's not just a house of cards.
I wonder if for every opportunity that is not available to the young talent of today, there's another path of lesser resistance that is more accessible. Like back when, Keith Urban, and I was on it, I played at a gig up in Caboolture, and they told me that Keith once played. So I'm sitting there saying, I played the same gig Keith Urban played back in the day. But, back in those days, that barrier to entry might have been cost of equipment or studio time and all of those sorts of things. Well, now those barriers of entry are virtually gone. That if you've got a guitar and an entry-level computer, you've got even a modicum of talent and whatever, you can churn out a product, distribute it for virtually no money on the Spotify's or the SoundClouds, and distribution is virtually endless between you as a musician, as an entertainer, as a talent, and the end consumer. Like, it's almost like those Sonys of this world have potentially lost some of their gatekeeper kind of positioning, their toll booth positioning, if you will. And like you said, the talent will always find a way. So I wonder if it will end up being some sort of equilibrium
that was the dream. That was the dream when it started happening with the internet. We thought, okay, this is a chance for indie artists to get out there and do their thing. But then streaming came along to squash that, because unless you're getting like 1 million streams of your song, you're not making enough money to get through the year. CD sales.
But does this now come back, Nick, though, to what you pioneered? Because I saw no other talent doing it back in the late 80s, early 90s. Does it now come back to the talent creating their own communities with which to, in inverted commas, live? You know what? I've loved seeing this. I don't know if there is the musical equivalent of this, but there's things for the thought leaders, if you will. There's a thing called Patreon.
Yep.
Where literally, as on a donation basis, with no there's no, hey, you give me money, I'll give you this. It is literally, Patreon is consumers who enjoy the spoken word from X, Y, or Z person just pay a monthly subscription to support that cause. And so I wonder if the onus is back on the artist to create the community again, like I saw firsthand you do, because I was part of that community. I wonder if the onus is, now that those barriers to entry are lessened, that sure, streaming might not be the remuneration source because it is such a small percentage of such a small, like Spotify might be $10 a month. Well, there's only so many ways you can slice and dice that $10 that goes to Spotify up. But I wonder if the using of Spotify to build, a community that is monetized in other ways, again, like I saw you do, like I saw Tuffy do. You guys built a community that ended up, being a commercial success as well as an artistic one.
Maybe. I think there would definitely be I hear what you're saying. I think there's value to that. I just think there is a disconnect between the reality of thinking people will put their hand in the pocket for so many causes and what they'll do in reality. Yet the Patreon
tells us they will. The Patreon phenomenon, because
some do.
These people are paying stupid YouTubers to watch them play video games. So that means
that's still a small number of when you're talking about millions of people online or let's say tens of thousands of people maybe in music wise online selling their stuff. You hear the story of those few, but the point is there's far more people not making money. And the fact that the challenge of that is that you have to make your music available on Spotify and these type of things. You just have to. And once people can get your music for free, it's very hard to the numbers that you will attract back in to pay extra money on top of that is very challenging. So I agree. I wonder if Nick, though, reality, I'm not sure how it works.
I wonder if it's always been that way, Nick, though, because for every we go see Bon Jovi play at Boondall. Mm-hmm. In that crowd, there are 20, me, you, and others that get paid to play, but aren't squillionaires based on our art. We get paid our $500 a night, our $300 a night, or whatever it is that we get as a paid working musician. And so for every one Richie Sambora that gets paid squillions, there's in Boondall 10,000 people. There's 30 of us that make our living playing music, and out of those 10,000 observers, there might be 1,000 people who can play some guitar, who are sitting there going, wow, I wonder if it's true then as it is true now, that out of every 5,000 people who buy a football, 4,900 of them are going to play for free with their kids on the weekend. Yeah, and if they do play some sort of sport, they have to pay to play that sport. Like most guitarists have to pay.
There are a fraction, my point being back in the 80s, 90s, most venues had entertainment of some description.
Mm.
Now it's just a very, very small fraction of venues that have entertainment. And a lot of those ones that do have entertainment, like you look around the valley, a lot of those are little cafes that maybe can hold 20 or 30 people, and they're getting bands in, and bands, offering bands like, get people in and you get $100 a night.
Mm. Oh, for sure.
That's
no
not sustainable
doubt
for a grassroots industry. Back in the 80s and 90s, you had the band circuit going on, and you had literally hundreds of bands playing across the state, playing 7 nights a week, from Cairns downwards, and inland. It was you're playing in all these places. So the live industry did die. It died with the major venues making more of a poker machine focus with what they did. And I wrote a letter to the Queensland government saying some ideas of what I thought could be done with venues supporting artists more on some of these nights to create more income nights for grassroots industry. And the response I got was, well, that will probably hurt the income of the venue. So, we wouldn't sort of challenge that. They're more interested in poker machine taxes than helping develop a grassroots arts industry. That's the bottom line.
So I wonder, and again, we could try and solve the world's problems, but again, it is this sort of discussion that might spark a thought in someone that how can it work? How did it might be an innovation like going from X sort of venues with poker machines to being the big day out and being that festival type mentality. It might be some sort of universal systemic change that goes from individual venues to festivals
Yep.
to whatever's next. Now, I don't know what that might be, but I wonder if based on everything else seems to be online,
Yep.
I think it is going to be an online solution that is that thing if it is to come.
And you're probably
I don't
right,
think
mate.
it's going to be
Yeah.
going back to a way of
Yeah.
ye olde worldy, even though I would love it to be, because I was part of that as both a consumer.
Maybe a combination, because I think live music will always be there. But the conversation goes beyond music, of course, because this conversation we're having about tossing ideas out there and just seeing where they land. I think of the things we have to be encouraging our communities to have, whether it's about aged care, whether it's about our banking systems, whether it's about the arts sector, all these things. It's like there's been a reset button has been pushed around the COVID thing, and suddenly we were heading towards being part of a globalized village. And suddenly it's becoming much more important to think locally. You know, we're cut off from the world for a while. So what does that mean for our local communities, for our local industries? People tend to be willing to buy local more. But amongst all these things, I think there are new models that need to emerge. And they're only going to emerge by us having conversations where we're willing to let people put their ideas out there, not abuse those ideas, but toss them back and forwards, and have adult conversations that we can then put towards our politicians, because it's not our politicians' job to have the answer to all these things. They are our representatives. They're not our leaders. Their job, they're going to fail at their job if we let them not listen to our voice. So we need to be having these conversations at community levels. And how we do that, I don't know, but that's just through these little shows we're doing, or my show I'm doing with Sunshine State of Mind. I think, if we can encourage people to share their ideas more in a respectful way. We're smart people. Let's come up with ideas across all these different sectors,
Yeah, I do love that, you're allowing a bloke like me who's got no idea about any of this stuff. Certainly
neither
no
do I, mate.
solution.
That's it.
Yeah. But it's great to have that thing, because what if someone who was listening to this, who, was a 20-year-old when you and I were, when I was watching you alongside me, but now they're 40 and they know some stuff. What if our conversation ends up sparking a thought in someone else? I mean, we look at something like Bitcoin that I know nothing about cryptocurrency or anything, but that started off with probably two bloody goofballs like me and you sitting around going, you know what we should do? We should make this thing. It's not even a coin, and let's just call it Bitcoin. Let's just see what happens. They're worth 5 cents now. Let's make and now the thing's worth 30 grand a pop.
Yep.
So that had to start with a conversation just like this.
That's right.
So
and find a way that the seniors in our community that have so much experience can engage with the youngest in our community who have the energy and are so switched on these days. I mean, I'm so impressed with my kids and their friends and their network, how switched on they are. And let's respect all these different ideas. And mate, we're talking about utopia, of course, but I don't think it's wrong to want utopia. Let's demand of ourselves better than what we've produced up until now.
Yeah. Well, and that takes us back to what Richard Branson, we go back to an hour or so ago when we were talking about Sir Richard. Most of his time right now is spent with an organization called the Elders. And it was Richard's vision that he made become a reality to take people like Nelson Mandela, to take leaders of age around the world and make it is called the Elders. And Richard ended up making that come to pass, where the wisdom of those, north of 60 with a lifetime of experience, having seen from, horse and cart to man on the moon and beyond, let's avail ourselves of that wisdom and figure out some solutions, and at least start conversations like this, and maybe do some good out there, as opposed to infighting about what pronoun we use to discuss how we represent ourselves in the world, and fighting to the death and looting over things, and just crazy, where things like silence, if you're silent, then they say silence is violence, but actual violence we can tolerate. We've got to get away from stuff like that and avail ourselves of maybe some of that wisdom that people far wiser than us have spent a lifetime amassing.
Hearing you, brother, hearing you. Mate, thanks for gasbagging with me.
Anytime, man. What song are we going to go out with? I reckon we go with Not in This Life. Eh? Now, what's your favourite song you're most proud of nowadays, man?
Well, mate, I have been finishing this off with a song called History's Pages, which is subtitled Advance Australia Where. And it's a song I wrote during the whole COVID thing, and a single I released that talks about what went through the, so parks are all closed or locked up in chains. No children's laughter, strange silence reigns. No school bells ringing, footsteps in the hall. No school bells ringing, whatever it is. But that wraps up into the chorus says, from history's pages, our former stages, they battled through hard times before. Yeah, they suffered losses, implanted crosses, then dragged themselves off the floor. So the young and the free, all girt by sea and inspired by what came before, can look at the sky with big open eyes, knowing we can be more. There's a future to share for people who care. Advance Australia where? And that's,
I love it, mate.
Yeah,
We got to
that's
go
right,
with
mate.
that, my man.
We've gone through harder stuff than this before. We've dealt through this is just sort of the latest drama we're going through. But
damn straight. I think a lot of our challenges are we've got it too comfortable. And if we're bored, like human beings, if we are bored and not challenged by whatever is going on in our environment, we'll make something up just because that's the sort of creature we are. So, I was looking through some of my posters today and I saw the Light Horseman, and it said, it was something like this catchphrase, and it's worded better than I. It was something like, they did the impossible, just no one bothered to tell them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, we've been through harder stuff than this. I agree with you 100%, my man.
Mate, you look back to Indigenous stage, and we've got 50,000 years of history here. The people survived all that time, understanding the land without the technology and whatever else. And, we've got so much to learn from that time. And then our modern history here, you think how far we've come in not even 300 years as a society. We've got a lot that's amazing. And this is another hiccup. But it's like a bit of a line in, it's not even a line in the sand, does it? It's like a bit of a reset where we have an opportunity to reassess some things about our society. And I don't have the answers to it. I just want to encourage people to get involved in what we want our society to look like moving forward. Because I think decisions we'll make over the next 6 to 12 months maybe will probably affect generations to come. And that's a serious time, man. We have a responsibility that we have to all step up to.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to what we've, when I say we, I take no credit because I wasn't part of it, but humans have done what no other creature that we know of has ever achieved. So it's not like we didn't do a whole lot right.
Yeah.
So I think we should be learning from a whole lot of those things that we have done and are doing right as a society. Yeah. And, I don't know that we need to reinvent too much of the wheel when we had such foundational, rock solid principles that got us this far when no other creature, evolutionarily has done so. I reckon we need to, take a look at what we've been doing right and not just saying everything we're doing over the years is wrong and we've got to throw it all out and whatever. We did a whole bunch right as a society.
I agree with that, but I also believe there are new frontiers that we have to not be afraid of. Like Tesla, I think it was Tesla that said, our next big advancement will when we get our head around consciousness. There's a whole new.
We still don't have a clue what this I think therefore I am being that we all are. We have no idea.
And we think that we know the answers to so many things, but we're just learning and accepting that fact and enjoying the journey. And mate, it's all out there to do. But buddy, thank you very much for your time.
More gas bagging, less everything else. That's what I say.
Absolutely. And all the best with anything you got anything coming up you want to promote, let people know about? No, I don't know if anyone's going to hear this chat or not, but who cares? I enjoy talking to you, so it's good.
Well, Joe Rogan, biggest podcast in the world. It started with chats like this, my man. So who knows where this goes.
And he never had guests as wonderful as you, mate. So
of course he did. He could have me in a heartbeat, mate. I tell you, I love Joe Rogan. I love him. But mate, thanks for having me, man. It's awesome and an honor, and it's been a wonderful journey. Being a friend of yours and being a fan of yours as well, my man.
Likewise, brother. I'll put your link down below in my whole thing here, and people check out Mr. Twiddle. And mate, we'll do a song together soon, eh?
Can't wait, my man.
All right. Thanks, buddy.
No worries, bud.
places, backs against the wall. She keeps looking out for new friends and never seem to call. She knows there's something better waiting for them all, but not in this life. Well, she loved him for a lifetime, gave away her youth, but when pushing came to shove, it was hard to face the truth. She'd lost her independence, couldn't rise above the fall, not in this life. What do we know about love? Ain't that much. Why do we sell our last resistance for a human touch? Till there's no time left anymore, not in this life. He still swaggers like he's 18, still can't face the truth. He left his dreams behind him, hides beneath the roof, and he lashes out in anger, the one love of his youth here in this life. And they pretend that life is perfect to family and friends. The children learn the tears and angers at love's end. Maybe they'll recover, overcome their fears, but not in this life. What do we know about love? Ain't that much. Why do we sell our last resistance for a human touch? Till there's no time left anymore, not in this life. Fools rush in where angels lay their heads, and we run into the sunset and skin our knees instead. We brush away the tears, kiss away the years. Morning and learn to live with pain. Take a breath, close our eyes, do it all again. I'm sure that there's a place where love will conquer all, but not in this life. What do we know about love? Ain't that much. Why do we sell our last resistance for a human touch? There's no time left anymore, not in this life. What do we know about love? Hell, ain't that much. Why do we sell our last resistance for a human touch? Till there's no time left anymore, not in this life.
Closed, locked up in chains. No children's laughter, restrained silence reigns. No school bells ringing, footsteps in the halls. No choir singing, there's no chasing balls. Politicians are acting quite civil these days, not kissing babies or stomping on graves. Australia sails on tacking into the wind, not sure what tomorrow will bring. And from history's pages, our fallen stages, battled through hard times before. Yeah, they suffered losses, implanted crosses, then dragged themselves off the floor. So the young and free, all good by the sea, and inspired by what came before, can look at the sky with big open eyes, knowing that we can be more. sailed home, too tired for glory, too many alone. Having faced war, then facing disease, a terror before that we'd never seen. Oh yes, it's true, we've been here before, and our country spirit was built through it all. We carried the wounded to safer high ground, walked through the storm and we found that from history's pages, our former stages, battled through hard times before. Yeah, they suffered losses, implanted crosses, then dragged themselves off the floor. So the young and the free, all good by the sea, and inspired by what came before, can look at the sky with big open eyes, knowing that we can be more. For people who care, there's a future to share. Advance Australia where Mama Matilda, or head to Bow River, or get lost at Circular Quay. As this sunburned country arises from something I never dreamed I would see. Will you hold me tonight as the easterly blows? Stars come alive and the Southern Cross glows, and dream time is calling us back to a place where we knew our souls were free. Seagulls are skimming low over waves. Rain is now falling on dry, dusty plains, with people still wiping smoke from their eyes. Nature is cleaning up big open skies to turn off the darkness, turn off the pain. After the drought there'll always be rain. Another day comes with a new rising sun, and we run towards what we can become. So the young and the free, all good by the sea, and inspired by what came before, can look at the sky with big open eyes, knowing that we can be more. For people who care, there's a future to share. Advance Australia where